Hey, welcome to Own Your Future podcast, where we help you own your future by helping you navigate through some of your biggest purchases of your life. Today, we're having on Tom Iessi. He's a local attorney who helps many of my buyers through the transaction process. Hey, Tom, how are you?
Hey, Eric, how's it going? Good to see you.
Good to see you too. So I have you on to meet some of my viewers out here to learn a little bit about what a real estate attorney does. So give us a little rundown of what you do and how you help people.
Sure. So I'm an attorney here at Turchetta Associates in Norwood. I've been an attorney since 2004. Most of my practice is in the areas of residential real estate, conveyancing, estate planning, trust, and probate administration.
Awesome. And so we've done a few deals together, and the last couple of years have been crazy. Give an idea of people, like what it's been like for the last couple of years as a real estate attorney, helping people navigate the kind of craziness that's been going on.
Yeah, so sure. I mean, it was bizarre to say the least. I mean, I felt like when this all kind of broke down, I think we expected to be shut down, like most of the rest of the economy was, and to our surprise, it was a point of emphasis with the governor to keep the real estate market open, to keep us working. And we did it as best we could and as safely as we could, and we all came out more or less on the other side of things in one piece. So I think it was shocking to everyone in the industry how busy it actually was. Things didn't grind to a halt. We were as busy as ever, surprisingly so.
Now, did you see anything from those times where, obviously people were waiving contingencies, they were trying to get the house, things were kind of going a little wild. If you wanted to get something, you had to do stuff that you didn't normally do in the past. Have you seen anything or any stories come from that people regretted? Have you seen anything like, hey, they shouldn't have bought this house, they wish they never waived, whatever? Do you have any stories like that?
I mean, I think you hear about in the industry, buyer's remorse is a big one. I think that happens a lot of times with newer home buyers too. Did I pay too much? Should I have waived, appraisal contingencies? It's costing me more out of pocket now. Should I have waived a home inspection? I just think people are in that position where it was such a seller's market, and like it always is up here in the Northeast, inventory so tight. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So while some of these things may have started with COVID, I certainly don't foresee them ending with COVID. Folks are still, a lot of these things I don't recommend to do. The waiving the home inspection thing, I think that's something that folks will still do. I don't think that's going to go away with COVID. The appraisal thing is certainly an issue, and you can speak to that more than I can. But that's something that started with COVID, but I feel like it's something that's going to stick around. What do you think?
Well, I mean, it depends on the property. I've seen, like a lot of my buyers, especially my first home buyers, I'm telling them to look at houses that are sitting on the market because you have a little bit more ability to negotiate and whatnot. And, you can negotiate the seller credit. So I've definitely seen more seller credits that we've been able to get. I've seen it easier for FHA buyers to get their stuff accepted because like a lot of people just wouldn't deal with FHA sometimes during the COVIDness. So, I've seen some improvement in that area. Now the inventory is still so tight that if the house is priced right, the property's still going quick and it's still getting multiple offers. So I tell people, like, especially people who are maybe tight on the finances, maybe wait to see if the property sticks around. Rather than getting in a bidding war, because some sellers are still unreasonable. But the big, for me, I thought the craziness was all the contingency waiving, because I would never recommend somebody, avoiding a home inspection or waiving the home inspection, but it was happening left and right. And in some cases, it was the only way that somebody would get the property.
Right.
And so, I had one customer who was out of all the deals, I think I did, I might have did close to 100 deals last year. I can't remember. or whatnot, or might have been over, or maybe 90. Um, but in any case, out of all those deals, I maybe only heard of one or two people that really ended up having an issue. Um, so for the most part, it seemed to have worked out, or at least I didn't hear the story.
I mean,
Have you heard of any crazy stories?
I think that remains to be seen. I think a lot of this, if there's some of these issues that could have been caught with home inspection, might not show up for a few years. I mean, just because they haven't shown up and someone's been in the house for 6 months, I don't think they're scot-free as far as all that goes. In that vein, and again, we work for the client, we do what they tell us. But when folks talk to me about home inspection, and I've seen it, and I've done it in my own personal life in buying a house, is I think what sellers worry about is, in this market anyway, is that the home inspection, because it traditionally has been used as a negotiating point, right? So they don't want to pull the house off the market because they've got multiple offers now, right? So they don't want to pull the house off the market and then buyer comes back and says, we found X, Y, and Z. Let's reduce a price or a closing cost credit. So I think that's really where that all arose, whereas that whole multiple offer thing that folks have going on. I think that's always been the seller's main concern. But I've seen it done. If you can do it properly, so you don't have to waive an inspection, in my opinion. For example, you can do it so it's really like an informational thing where it basically says, hey, I'm doing a home inspection, but I'm not using it as a point of negotiation for purchase price. I'm using it to make sure there's nothing structurally non-sound with the property, that that the roof is solid, that there's not termites, that the foundation isn't sinking into the ground, that type of thing. And I think if it's, and this is where I always talk about, you need a good team. This is where your realtor comes in. They can frame it that way to the listing agent, and it kind of sets their mind at ease, because I've seen that multiple times. And again, I've done that in my own home purchase. And as long as folks know, the sellers know it's not a negotiation point, I think that was a way around it. Because again, it's a huge investment, and to waive, and especially here in the Northeast where the homes are older, we don't have a lot of new construction here. I just think you could be asking for trouble. And it's not something something I'd be risk averse to doing, but folks have done it again. But with a good listing agent, good lawyer, I think there's ways that you can make it more palatable to sellers.
Yeah, I've actually seen where people said, "Hey, we'll do a home inspection, but we won't come back to you if there's less than $10,000."
Right. Exactly. Right.
So, I completely agree with you. Like, a lot of it is like sometimes the seller just doesn't want to be nickeled and dimed. I mean, we've all been nickeled and dimed before, and it's annoying. Hey, if it's under 5 or if it's under 10, I won't come back to you. So we've seen that, but me personally, I would never recommend it. Did you see any other crazy contingencies being waived or whatnot?
The appraisal contingency was the other big one, and that I did see folks put more cash out of pocket, but folks seem to be okay with that. So I don't think folks were upset or surprised when that happened, because I think on the other side of the coin, people will say, well, gee, I'm paying rent and it's $2,500 a month. It costs more than my mortgage payment would. As long as the client's happy with the cash they put in, I think I don't have an issue with that part of it. But those were the two big things. It was the waiving of home inspection and appraisals.
Yeah, it was big. One of the things I actually wanted to ask you about was title insurance. So a lot of people don't understand what title insurance is, and they don't understand the reason for it. And they're like, there's two types. There's owners and lenders. And somebody says, well, why do I need owners if the lender is going to get it? I always recommend, I always tell people, I recommend you get an owner's title, but you really should talk to an attorney about it. So maybe you could, tell people a little bit about what title insurance is, and then maybe tell them why they might want to get owner's title, even though the lender is getting title insurance.
Sure. Okay, so as Eric said, there's basically two types of title insurance, okay? There's the lenders, which protects the lender in the event that they foreclosed on you and they own the home. And then the quote-unquote optional title insurance is the owner's title insurance. What it does is it runs with the land. So it doesn't matter that, for instance, if you're one of the few people in the area that are buying a new house, because sometimes I'll see that, well, why do I need title insurance? It's a new house. So it runs with the land. So it doesn't matter that the house on top of it is new or old, for that matter. It runs with the land from the beginning of time forward. What will happen is, really in Massachusetts, it's strongly recommended really for anybody, but it's particularly important here in Massachusetts, just with the way our laws are. So for example, here in Massachusetts, we're what we call a quitclaim state. So if there is a title issue with your home, you cannot go back and sue the seller. It's almost like buying a used car without a warranty. You can't go back and say, well, the transmission was no good, and sue the seller. So you can't go back to your seller here and say, there's a title issue. You're kind of out of luck. The seller conveys what they have, and that's what you get at closing. Beyond that, here in Massachusetts, by statute, the closing attorney will go back 50 years per statute into the registry of deeds. So anything that's outside of that 50-year window would never show up in the attorney's title exam. Also, just because it's data entry and it's human nature, there are a lot of things that can, whether they be misindexed, mistakes made at the registry of deeds, that a title exam is just not going to show up. So what will happen is, if there's a title issue and you have an owner's policy, usually this will all come up when you go to sell your home. What will happen is the title insurance company will put their lawyers on it and try to resolve it, okay? If it's something like completely catastrophic where you no longer have good title to your property and you really don't own it, they'll reimburse you up to 150% of your purchase price with inflation. So it's potentially a ton of protection for a one-time fee, and the rates are all set by the Commonwealth like any other insurance. But these rates for both your lender's policy and your owner's policy are all determined by your purchase price and your loan amount.
Yeah. So do you have any examples of somebody who maybe didn't get owner's title and they rejected it?
Well, I mean, I see folks use it all the time. Like a lot of time when I'm representing sellers, there's like a bad mortgage discharge, which was one of the big ones that we've seen, just because they all sell them and it was discharged by the wrong bank, that type of thing. If there's a title, if you have title insurance in place, they'll take care of it and you'll be able to close as scheduled. If you don't have title insurance, it's an issue, and closings get delayed and maybe they fall through. I've seen that. I've had that happen before on the sales side of things, for sure. We see folks use it all the time. Every once in a while, someone will come in and there'll be a title issue, and if they don't have title insurance, it's an issue. They're paying out of pocket to try to resolve it.
So let me ask you this: like, if somebody has lender's title insurance, then why do they still need the owner's title? Is there a reason for that? Does the lender's title insurance not kick in some circumstances, or how does that?
The lender's title insurance protects your mortgage company or your bank, right? That protects them in the event that they foreclosed on you and they now own the property. It does nothing for you. Okay, you need an owner's policy to protect yourself if there's a title issue. If there's a title issue, you can't go back to your lender and say, oh well, you have title insurance, I decided not to buy it. That's not going to protect you. It's like any other insurance policy. You need your own insurance policy. Again, it's I highly recommend it. And the vast majority of folks understand it and want to purchase it. It's like I said, it's a huge investment, and it's a one-time fee that you pay up front at closing, and it covers you the entire time that you own the home, no matter how long that is.
Yeah. So I ran into an issue in September. My buyers were buying a property, and the seller never bought owner's title insurance, and it came out all in the title work. And the attorney said, yeah, this person's probably not going to be able to sell their property for 2 or 3 years, and it's probably going to cost them $40,000 to $50,000 to fix the title issue. So in that case, you either fix the title issue or you just never sell your property.
Exactly. Yeah. And like I said, I've seen that happen. Deals have fallen through over it. Because then sometimes if you're in that situation, had the seller there had an owner's policy, that thing would have closed the schedule, because the title insurance company would have insured it, and the buyer's title insurance company would have allowed it. Yeah, these things do fall through. These things, people do use these policies. It's not kind of an abstract theoretical thing where, I mean, I always tell people, you hope you don't have to use it, but you have it if you need it. And again, my experience is people do use it. but it's like any other insurance. You know, there's no 100% guarantee that you'll ever need it or not, but you know.
So, shoot, I just lost my train of thought. And what I was going to ask. In any case, so what's the difference between a quit claim deed? So where that's quit, which is QUITE, right? Quit.
Right. No, no E, but yeah.
No E, so it's QUIT.
Right.
So what's the difference between that and the warranty deed?
Yeah, so warranty deeds they use in other parts of the country. I think what basically that says is that the seller warrants good title to you, among other things. So in that case, you could go back and sue your seller if there was a title issue. But that's all, and that's all well and good. But if your seller is no longer with us or doesn't have the money to fix it, I mean, you still, even in those states, that's why title insurance is recommended. I just say we're in Massachusetts where you have absolutely no one else to go after. It's especially important.
And so I also heard a figure about title, and you can tell me if this is accurate, but I once heard that 25% of all titles to real estate property have issues. Does that sound like an accurate statement?
I mean, it could be. I mean, especially the big one was the discharges back in the day locally, bankruptcies, where the bankruptcies laws all kind of changed. Those were and foreclosures around here. Those were the big claims that came in here. We've seen historically here in Massachusetts condominiums. Those are some of the biggest claims that have been paid out. There's a variety of things that can come up over the years, but yeah, I've never heard that number before, but I mean, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. And so what about like the 2008, 2007, 2008 crash? Now there was a bunch of foreclosures during that time, and I heard that a bunch of those foreclosures weren't done accurately or correctly, and a lot of stuff was held up, and there was like things going back and forth with the courts. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean that's been a big point of and I think in the last couple of years they've tried to address it, but that was a big point of folks having bad title or really not owning their homes at all, and a big thing that title insurance had to take care of. It was just because laws changed and they went retroactive. So what was foreclosures were deemed no longer valid. So it was like title insurance companies trying to find old sellers to sign off on deeds and that type of thing. And the folks that had title insurance were great, and those that didn't were kind of scrambling and in trouble. The legislature and the governor have tried to try to lessen some of these issues in the last couple of years. With time, some of these foreclosures have become valid, but it's been the last 15 years was a huge point of emphasis for sure.
Crazy. So do you see anything changing in the legal field when it comes to real estate in the next couple of years? Is there anything on the horizon?
From our side of things, I really don't foresee any major changes at this point. Again, foreclosure laws have been kind of updated. The thing about real estate is it touches on various parts of law, right? I mean, it's real estate, but sometimes there's probate law involved, family law involved, that type of thing. So I think if changes are kind of coming, they may come on the bankruptcy, those type of things, they may be coming on the periphery and it'll affect us. As of right now, I think we're kind of solid, but if there are changes, I think it'll be on those kind of peripheral, quote unquote non-real estate centered changes.
So you brought up a good point about how real estate touches a lot of other issues, and it made me think of a customer of mine. I helped him buy his house several years ago, and he reached out to me. And he has a blended family. His wife has kids, he has kids, and they got married since he bought the property. Then he calls me up and he's like, hey, I want to put my wife on the deed now. And I go, well, that's not actually how you want to do it now, because you're married with a blended family. And I was trying to tell him that I was trying to get him in touch with a lawyer to maybe go into a trust and try to figure out how to actually develop the property because of Massachusetts, how Massachusetts law works when there's a blended family and somebody passes away and there's a property involved. So maybe you can actually give a little insight on that, because we do live in a culture where there are so many blended families, and if they are in one, like, what's the proper way to set up the deed, or how do you want to,
Yeah, I
maybe.
mean, I wouldn't even get that specific to blended families. It can even be just sometimes an older couple that is worried about how's their house going to get to their kids when they're gone. And what I always tell people is, and as you touched on it already, trust are the way to go. If you have like an elderly couple that has grown kids, the one thing that I tell people, because I do a lot of estate planning here, and I always tell people with estate planning, there's usually no right or wrongs to anything. It's a matter of preference. But the one thing that's a big no-no is to start putting your kids on deeds, bank accounts, all those types of things. Okay, if your kids get divorced, if they go bankrupt, if they get sued, it's an asset that they own now as much as you. And a divorce lawyer or a litigator is going to go after that asset. I have seen that come up. I've seen it come up in a bankruptcy on a seller rep, and then you're like trying to pay off a bankruptcy trustee. I've seen that. That's why there's things like trust planning, we do wills, kind of all those things. And that's the way to handle it. I always tell people, please do just whatever you do, please do not put your kids on your homes, on your bank accounts, that type of thing. There's too many issues that can arise. It's a terrible risk. We have better ways to do these things that are safer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a huge one. I see parents putting kids on deeds all the time, and I'm like, man, you do not want to do that. And people just don't understand the risk involved.
Yeah, they really don't, unless they sit down with the lawyer and they explain it to them, and then some of them are shocked over it, and are horrified of what they've done. I do see this every once in a while come into my office.
So listen, people, if you have a family member, a parent, or a spouse on your deed, you probably want to get that rectified sooner rather than later. It will cost you a little bit of money to do a trust, but it's way more cheaper than the alternative. So I would heed that warning. My customer, who I consider a friend, that I helped get a house, I don't think he's still listened to me, and I can only tell him so many times to get a damn trust, and not put his wife on the deed. But I'm pretty certain he hasn't done it yet. Maybe he'll watch my podcast and he'll change his mind. So yeah, that was a big one. So any other tips? So obviously you represent buyers and sellers.
Right.
So the tips that you'd give a seller, maybe the tips that you'd give a buyer, maybe those are different tips.
Yeah. Okay. So let's, and I think some of these are overlap. I always tell people you need a good team, right? So if you're buying a house, you need a good realtor, you need a good lawyer, especially you need a good mortgage guy. The good news for you folks is, believe it or not, Eric's a lot smarter than he looks like. He's great. I used him when I bought my house. That should tell you everything. Because what I do see all the time, and what is kind of a very recurring issue here, is folks that use mortgage companies that are either across the country, in their mom's basement somewhere up in New Hampshire, this type of thing, and they don't get the importance of dates here in Massachusetts. You've signed a contract, you've put a lot of money down with your deposit on this purchase and sale contract based on the purchase prices alone up here. If you breach your contract, you're not ready to go. You can lose your deposit quite easily. So what I always tell people is you need a good mortgage guy, because they'll make sure they meet all those dates. In other parts of the country, you'll deal with the lender and they'll be like, okay, our closing date's December 19th, say, for instance. And it's not like well, we'll close if we're ready. Your lender's got to be ready to close on December 19th, or you're going to have an issue. Your deposit's at risk. Mortgage contingency dates. I know we didn't talk about this earlier, Eric, but mortgage contingency dates. That's your out of the contract. When that date comes, if you don't have your mortgage loan in place, you're allowed to. You really need it in place, or the seller can walk away from you and say, "I'm going to find somebody else because this buyer's making me nervous that he's not going to get her loan." I know Eric from experience. Eric knows those dates are super important. He gets in, he makes sure he meets them. Again, when you deal with some of these other companies across the country, they don't get it. I always tell people, buying a house is exciting, but it can be very stressful. And you don't want that kind of stress. It's no good. So again, good realtor, experienced realtor. Very important to have a good mortgage guy, good lawyer. They'll all work together and they'll ensure that your closing goes as smoothly as possible. Same thing on the seller's end. You need a good realtor that has a pulse on the local market, that does this, and can navigate some of these issues, whether it be home inspection waivers, multiple offers, those type of things.
So you kind of brought up a good point, and I'm going to segue into it. A lot of people don't understand that the offer that you sign is actually a contract. Is that correct?
That's a great point. It really is. We've had a series of cases over the years here in Massachusetts that reaffirmed that. Yeah, you can't. If for instance, if a seller accepts an offer, he can't then after that a day later go and accept another offer. It's a written contract. It's a contract that he's going to sell to the buyer, and the buyer has a right to purchase. So yes, I've seen where it's quite common that people have sued on that. And the buyer has a right, whether when the seller breaches, whether it's that initial offer or the purchase and sale contract, if quote unquote, the seller just changes their mind and wants to sell it to somebody else, the buyer can go to court and make the seller sell it to them. And that we do see from time to time for sure. But yes, you should be very careful and understand that when you sign an offer and submit that $1,000 check with it, you're binding yourself on both ends. The seller you must sell, and the buyer you must buy. Occasionally we'll see a buyer walk away. At that point, there's only $1,000 in the game, so they forfeit that. But when you get to P&S time, you're talking about real money, because you're talking about 5% down. So these are quite substantial sums of money. And as a buyer, and as a buyer's lawyer, what I try to do as a buyer's lawyer is kind of just to protect their deposit and to make sure they have as many outs as possible. Usually the big one is they just have to make sure that they get their mortgage loan in place. So go ahead.
So I had another question for you, because a lot of people don't understand that an offer is a contract, but there's actually also been case law about agreements over text message and stuff like that. Is that correct?
That I can't speak to. You still would need my understanding is you still need a signed writing, and you need and for any contract you need consideration. So there has to be money put down with the offer.
Okay. I thought there was something on case law about text messages and emails and stuff like that, but it might not have come up enough.
Yeah, I don't think so. I haven't heard that yet, because typically or traditionally you need a signed. I've heard of emails and text messages being used in other contexts, but I can't say that I've seen it come up in any case law specifically to an offer situation.
Okay. I'm not a lawyer, so don't take my word for it. And I often
Eric, you need the tie, Eric. No one thinks you're a lawyer without the tie. I
know you do look like a super lawyer today. I'm just saying.
Yeah, you see the diploma's in the back, Eric.
So I actually had another question. So a lot of times where the offer is a contract and you're signing a contract, when you do that, a lot of real estate agents don't seem to understand that. Do you run into a lot of times when offers aren't properly written up and you're now going to contract and you're trying to fix it? Do you understand where I'm going with this?
Yeah. So really, as attorneys, we're really bound by that initial offer. We can't change things. So I mean, for instance, if your offer is subject to say you're selling your current home, if that's not in your offer, like it's really not something we can put in the P&S. At that point, we're trying to negotiate it. But if I was a seller's lawyer, I'd be like, no, it's not part of the agreement. So what I always tell people when I'm doing home buyers, specifically with first home buyer seminars, first timers, is the offer is like it's a simple document, and it's typically drawn up really usually a lot of times right on site by your realtor. But I always tell people you need to make sure it's more than the first page that says, well, this is what we're offering to pay for it. Really, as important is that second page that kind of lists all your contingencies, right? So those some of them being like my mortgage contingency, my home inspection contingency, a sale contingency. Those things all need to be in your offer. Because again, it is a contract, and once the seller accepts it, you're kind of bound by those terms. So again, always check that second page. It's why it's important that you have a realtor. I know some folks think they don't need them, but it's why it's important to have a realtor and have a good realtor, because they'll have their kind of finger on the pulse of all those things and make sure all those contingencies are part of your offer.
Great. Yeah. So I think that's about it. Do you have any final tips or any final words of wisdom for my viewers out there?
Yeah, so sure. Just the world we live in now, wire fraud. It's the industry is just rife with it. You should never take wiring instructions from somebody over email. You should always verify those with whoever you're working with, whether it's an attorney or another arena. But I know folks think, how could possibly some small, little old me get found by some, hacker trying to scam me out of wiring? But it happens. It's rife in the industry. So just be careful with all that kind of thing.
Interesting. Well, hey, you heard it there. Be careful where you're sending your money. Don't just accept wire instructions from anybody. So, Tom, you're a great lawyer. I've worked with you a few times. So if somebody
Thanks, Eric. Checks in the mail, buddy.
Well, hey, I appreciate that. I am smarter than I look. I'm more than a pretty face. But hey, if somebody has questions about buying and selling real estate, or they just have questions about a house that they already bought, deed questions, some of the stuff that we talked about, how would somebody get in touch with you?
Sure. So they can call me here at the office at 781-769-0003, or they can email me, and my email is T as in Tom, my last name IESSI @norwoodlawyers.com.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you for coming, Tom. Viewers, thank you for coming to Own Your Future podcast. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and do any of the other social media stuff you're supposed to do so that other people can watch my program. And we'll see you next time.
All right, Eric. Good to see you, buddy.
Thank you.